What's happening, Saints fans? Welcome into another edition of Saints Now by Chat Sports. As always, I'm your host, Trizzy Trace. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's video. The top 30 visits have been leaked. They haven't had all 30 top 30 visits. In case you didn't know, you can have 30 top 30 visits, but they haven't had all of them. So we're going to just go through all of the visits they've had thus far up to this point. On Wednesday, April 9th, as a part of our live show, we filmed this video, and we go live every single week, so I encourage you to subscribe to get more Saints content. And also, I encourage you to subscribe because we're chipping away to the road to 50K. The next milestone, 43,500 subs, and we just need 320 members of the Who Dat Nation to lock us in and subscribe for free Saints content every single day. My name is Trizzy Trace. Thank you guys so much for watching. Without further ado, let's break down the top 30 visits. Let's break it down, Saints fans. Hope you guys are excited to go through all of the names that have been linked to the Saints and have had top 30 visits with New Orleans. Before we dive into this, I think it's important to set some context here and kind of explain what a top 30 visit is. Because honestly, when I was going through this, I started confusing myself between what's a top 30 visit and what's a draft, like a combine visit, and what's a private workout. Like, well, what's the difference here? So a top 30 visit, teams can bring in up to 30 players for private workouts, or for private visits, I should say, for interviews, medical evals, and all of that good stuff. It's to kind of learn more about them, to go through some tests and to see how the medicals check out for a lot of these players, and to kind of get to know them on a human level and on an individual level, not as a player as much. But they cannot work out and they cannot do any sort of drills here. Whereas in a private workout, you can have a separate private workout from a top 30 visit, and these are on-field workouts where the skills and the athleticism of these players are assessed. So top 30 visit, no workouts. You learn medicals, you learn more about the players. Whereas private workouts, you get to see what they're capable of as football players. Now, the Saints, in case you didn't know, in the last handful of years, there isn't a large history of New Orleans acting on these top 30 visits. Since 2021, only 3 players have had top 30 visits that were either drafted or undrafted free agents, and we're going to go through those 3 players here right now. So the first one, or I should say in 2023, again, it's 2021. I went back all the way to 2021 to the top 30 visits, and the most recent were in 2024 and 2023. Kendre Miller, he did have a top 30 visit with the New Orleans Saints, and he ended up becoming the 71st overall selection in the 3rd round of the 2023 NFL draft. And obviously, there was a lot of discourse of, well, do you go Tajay Spears here? Do you do this? Do you do that? The Saints opted to go with Kendre Miller, and as we know, the tail of the tape has been he has been unavailable. So he was a top 30 visit, though, and the Saints did draft him. Now, in 2024, last year, Christian Boyd was a top 30 visit. He was selected at number 199. Enrico Payton, actually, interestingly enough, he was an undrafted free agent who also had a top 30 visit with the New Orleans Saints. So not a lot of history before 2023, but in the last 2 years, there's been a little bit more. So I'm not going to sit here and say that any of these guys that have a top 30 visit are a smokescreen. Like, I don't want that to be the takeaway here, but I will say this recent history shows that they don't get picked often. So when a player has a top 30 visit, I'm going to sit here and say, if you don't love the player, if you hate the player, whatever it is, don't freak out. It's okay. It's just a visit. I don't necessarily know if this is ultimately going to be anything that comes to fruition here. So we're just going to start things off with first batch of top 30 visits, starting off with these 4 players. Quinn Ewers, Tetairoa McMillan, Savion Williams, and Isaac Tesla. I have to say right now, first things first, when it comes to the wide receivers, I love that all 3 of these guys fit the size profile of what the New Orleans Saints are missing. But before we dive into the wide receivers in detail, let's talk Quinn Ewers. I'm not going to sit here and say I love Quinn Ewers as a prospect. I don't hate Quinn Ewers as a prospect. I just want to see Quinn Ewers be a player that is in a good system. And I do think when Kellen Moore works with his quarterback, whoever it is, it has to be his guy. So if Quinn Ewers is Kellen Moore's guy, okay, that works with me. I'm going to support it, of course, because I'm a Saints fan. But I don't necessarily know if I will love it. I think that he has shown development. He's not a guy who's going to burn you with his legs, but he is somebody who has nice touch, who is a natural passer, and ultimately I think could be a player that is on the Saints' radar. They've had a lot of interest with him. They've taken him out to dinners. They were at his pro days. A lot of stuff between Quinn Ewers. So I think that there is at least some level of interest there. But let's talk about Tet McMillan, the number one wide receiver in this draft class, in my personal opinion. You see the size profile, 6'4", 220 pounds. He is a large frame, large guy with a big playability, and I really, really like that from Tet McMillan. And to be honest, like, it doesn't matter if it's Tet. It doesn't matter if it's Savion Williams. It doesn't matter if it's Isaac Tesla. I don't really care who it is. It could be Jack Best, Jaden Higgins, Trey Harris. There's a plethora of options that would fit this mold. The Saints, they recognize that there is a need at wide receiver, and they recognize it's a specific need at wide receiver, not a guy who is a speedster. You have to bring somebody in who is physical, who has a large size profile, who can win over the middle, and we're going to show you the wide receiver measurables. You're not going to believe this. There is not a single player in the wide receiver group that is above 6'3". That's not good. You need more of that. The tallest, the biggest wide receiver right now on the roster is Bub Means at 6'2", 215 pounds. I'm not going to sit here and say that's concerning, but I'm going to sit here and say that they have a need. And the Saints recognize that need. And I feel that they recognize that need based off the wide receivers that they brought in for those top 30 visits. So we're just going to keep this thing moving. There's a big need of wide receiver, and I like that they're addressing that specific need, or at least trying to address it. Now, Michael Williams, Jaylon Walker, Oluwafemi, Oladejo, and Shamar James. I'm sorry about the pronunciation. I'm just really, really bad with names. But let's talk about a guy who I know a lot about, Michael Williams, and he is a very special player. At one point in time, he was talked about as one of the top pass rushers in this draft class, but as the pre-draft process has played out, his draft stock has kind of just been moving up, down, left, and right. And I do think Michael Williams is a really good player to keep an eye out for, but I also really, really want you guys to pay attention to a player by the name of Jaylon Walker. He's also a guy that the Saints had for a top 30 visit. He can play pretty much 50-50 when it comes to playing in coverage or, trying to play as a pass rusher. I also think that he's a player who's really good as a hybrid edge or linebacker, and he could be really good in Brandon Staley's scheme with the new 3-4 defense, I should say, and working alongside Bo Davis. He's an excellent defensive line coach. I'm really excited about that, and so we'll have to see what happens with there. But if I went with one Bulldog, I like Jaylon Walker just because of the versatility there. But if you want just a pure pass rusher, the pure defensive end, that's going to be Michael Williams. But I really like this option of Jaylon Walker. So really quickly, I want to ask you a question because, in round one and in round two, you have the opportunity to add to a lot of different players in the draft. So I got to ask you, would you rather go offense or defense? Just type O for offense or D for defense for me down in the comment section. Share your thoughts. Let me know. This will be the pinned comment. So when you get hit with an ad break, I encourage you to scroll down, share your thoughts, and by the time you're done commenting, the video will be playing again here in just a moment. Now let's keep this thing moving. We got Nick Imanwari, Jonas Sanker, Siobhan Revel, and Quincy Riley. And I can tell you right now, I'm a big fan of a couple of these guys, and I'd be okay with pretty much any of them. But we're going to hone in on two players, Nick Imanwari first. He's a very productive player at South Carolina. The coverage stats are very impressive, only 200 yards allowed, no touchdowns. He had 6 pass breakups, 4 interceptions, and allowed a quarterback rating of 37.1. I think he would be an excellent addition to the Saints defense, which quite frankly could use another young defensive back to build around. But I also liked the idea of Siobhan Revel, who's a player that was also brought in for a top 30 visit. He's a talented player. There is obviously these small school concerns. However, I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm too worried about that. Worth noting, he did tear his ACL back in September, but before the injury, he was absolutely balling. He only has 4 missed tackles over the course of his career. Very nice size, very nice frame, and he does offer some special teams ability. The pros and the cons are very easy to see whenever you check out the tape. I think he's a player to definitely keep an eye out for, and the Saints do have a need at cornerback as well, so I would love to see the Saints invest at least in one of those top what? You have 6 top or picks in the top 150. You got to make one of those a cornerback, right? I mean, that's just at least my personal opinion. And if you also want to get my personal opinion, I can tell you one thing. Game Time, in my personal opinion, and it's not an opinion, it's a fact. It's the best ticketing app in the whole wide world. And if you're a basketball fan, I know it's tough to watch the Pels. However, silver lining, the tickets are going to be dirt cheap, and they get even cheaper when you download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CHATSPORTS. Terms do apply, but you can get great deals on last-second tickets and even see your seat view before you buy tickets with the Game Time app. All-in prices show you what you pay without hidden fees or expenses, and Game Time has a really cool feature called Super Deals. These tickets are the best value for events. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. You can get tickets to Jazz Fest. My Arkansas Razorbacks are headed to Baton Rouge to take on the LSU Tigers here in a few weeks, so definitely recommend checking out that game. A lot of implications for Omaha and the SEC Championship or SEC Tournament at the end of the season. And then, of course, you can get tickets to the Falcons at Saints game. We don't have a date yet, but tickets are available, and you can see the seat views. You can see it's a super deal. I highly encourage you to download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CHATSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. All the information is in the comment section and description of this video. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with the Game Time app. Download Game Time today, create an account, and use code CHATSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but once again, create an account and download the Game Time app. Use code CHATSPORTS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Now, a big name to keep an eye out for. I unfortunately don't think it'll matter. Mason Graham. He was also on a top 30 visit with the New Orleans Saints, and I can tell you right now, if he is available at number 9, you sprint. And I mean Usain Bolt, elbows to ears, sprint to the draft stage to turn in your card, because Mason Graham must be a New Orleans Saint if he's available at 9. There's no chance he falls to 9 for what it's worth. If you do really want Mason Graham, you're going to have to trade up to go and get him. But he is an extremely talented player. I think pairing him up with Brian Brzee would be absolutely electric. But another name to keep an eye out for in terms of the top 30 visits is Dion Walker, the player out of Kentucky. I don't want to sit here and say that I dislike this as an option, but I do think that he is a player that, we'll have to see. Going into the season, there was top 10 buzz. There was first-round buzz for him. And our draft experts here at Chat Sports, Tom Downey and Jack Sperry, they have him at a third-round grade. Some pros and cons for him. The movement skills at the size are unreal. I mean, 6'7", 331 pounds. Very, very massive size. Kentucky, fun fact, would drop him into coverage. Somehow it worked. The upper body power is really, really nice, but some cons. He plays way too tall. The top-heavy build, and that kind of stuff can be a little bit of a factor. But, I will say this, when it comes to the defensive line as a whole and the defensive scheme as a whole, I'm just eager to see what the new defensive line is going to look like. Again, new scheme under Brandon Staley, new coach with Bo Davis. I am absolutely in love with this new coaching staff, and I do believe even the guys on the roster like Isaiah Foskey and Carl Granderson, Cam Jordan, all of those guys are going to benefit from this coaching change and from this scheme change, so we'll have to see what happens whenever things get going. But I'm just excited. I'm really, really eager to see how the new defensive line looks, and I think it's going to be fun. It's going to be much more modern and something that we haven't gotten to see in quite a while, so it's going to be a good time. If you guys want the Saints to absolutely crush this draft, I need you to like this video. They need to. They absolutely have no excuse not to, because this is a very, very, very important offseason. If you agree with this statement right here, the Saints have to crush the draft, I need you to like this video. Alrighty, let's talk about some running backs here. Ollie Gordon, he's a name to definitely keep an eye out for. At one point in time, there was conversations about him potentially being a Heisman candidate. However, things kind of dipped off in the past season after a down year for the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Shout out to my baby brother. He is a student at OSU. I also do not like Oklahoma State. No pokes. We're not going to say go pokes. It's no pokes. But then another name to keep an eye out for, Larison. Let me tell you about this kid. He had back-to-back seasons with over 1,100 yards. He averaged 6.2 yards per carry in 2023. He had 5.2 yards per carry in 2024, and then he averaged 13.7 yards per catch in 2024. Accumulated a grand total of 1,400 yards, 17 touchdowns on the ground, 847 receiving yards, and 6 touchdowns through the air. That is a really good production for a small school player out of UC Davis, but let's hone in on some bigger name guys. You can see side by side, these two players, pretty solid. But I will tell you right now, I don't think that these are my top guys. They're not players that I'm in love with. But I can sit here and tell you, when you go and take a look at what the New Orleans Saints need and you take a look at what the roster looks like, they definitely need a running back. You cannot leave this draft class without a running back. Whether you prioritize in a round 1 with Genty, whether you go round 2 and get a Travion Henderson, maybe a Marion Hampton or something like that. Maybe in round 3 you go get Cam Scattaboo. Maybe in round 4, 5, or 6 it's somebody else that we haven't talked about today. But the Saints have to leave with the running back. There is no question about it, and that's not something I'm willing to argue with. They definitely need it. And they also definitely need to make sure that whatever they bring in is a compliment to Alvin Kamara, but can also be the bell cow back inevitably whenever he retires. Now, last few names to keep an eye out for: Thomas Fedome, Josh Connerly, and Ariante Ursery. Yes, I'm getting in word from my executive producers that your boy has perfect pronunciation. I didn't even pronounce that right, but it's all good. Let's throw it to the PFF grades for Ariante Ursery. He tested out pretty well according to Pro Football Focus in terms of how he graded out. 77.5 overall grade, 77.3 pass blocking grade, 73.6 run blocking grade. And, for the Minnesota Golden Gophers, I will say this: he isn't somebody that you should be absolutely dead set on taking, but he does have some potential. He's a second round grade from our draft experts. He's very, very large. He has decent athletic ability. However, he runs into some leverage issues. And, at times in 2023, it seemed like he was much better than in 2024. So there's all the names. The top 30 list so far. We broke them down. I've tweeted about them. I posted on Instagram. I posted on TikTok. So let me know if you guys have any thoughts on my social medias. Y'all stay golden. Thank you so much for tuning into today's video. We'll see you next time.